Hello to all you movie barfs and welcome back to the channel. Shazam was released in 2019 and tells the story of a 14-year-old kid who can transform into a man bearing the powers of the gods just by saying a word. After the flop of Batman vs Superman and Justice League, DC filmmakers were trying to go for a more lighthearted and comedic take, which we got in Justice League and Aquaman. And that's also what we got with Shazam, which worked for the film. I mean, the movie's basically 1988's Big, starring Tom Hanks, but with superpowers. Overall, it was well received by audiences and critics alike, getting a fresh Rotten Tomatoes score and grossing $366 million at the box office. The film's marketing was pretty good too, with the trailer and posters showing the lighter comedic tone. Just look at the poster of him with a bubblegum, and you start to get a kind of Deadpool vibe going on. Even most of the reviews on YouTube are praising it for being another rare, good entry into the DCEU after Aquaman. But when I first watched it in cinemas, I was pretty underwhelmed. Sure, it's not a bad movie, but was it really that good? It felt pretty mediocre and ho-hum to me, and I was wondering, where is all this praise coming from? I mean, what did I miss? Looking back at the film, here are several things I didn't really appreciate. Now, bear in mind, although it sounds like I'm bashing the film, I still feel it's worth a watch, and it's still an enjoyable movie experience. Just not these parts we're about to go through. Number 1. Shazam's personality is nothing like Billy Batson's. Starting off with the most obvious one, and the one that bugs me the most, it's the fact that Billy Batson, the 14-year-old teenager, well, his personality pretty much vanishes when he transforms into Shazam. They're like completely different people, just like how Clark Kent is a complete 180 compared to Superman. Billy is kind of a stoic, serious guy. He's pretty walled up emotionally, and that's perfectly understandable given his rough childhood as a foster kid. He doesn't crack many jokes, except for locking up the police in the store at the start of the film. He's the quiet kind of guy who'd, keep to himself, and honestly would be kind of a buzzkill if he joined a party. That's all fine and good so far, but when he becomes Shazam, he basically becomes a totally different person, inconsistent with his character. Now, instead of being all stoic and reserved, as Shazam he's doing stuff like flossing to the tune of Queen's Don't Stop Me Now, one of the best uses of the song in a movie, by the way. Making his own remix of Eye of the Tiger in public and basically being a very animated and outlandish character. This inconsistency between the brooding Billy and the upbeat Shazam was like a reverse Jekyll and Hyde situation. You can't reconcile the two characters together. If anything, I thought that Shazam's personality was perfectly aligned with that of Freddy's nature instead of Billy's. Now, Zachary Levi was the perfect cast as the man-child Shazam, but it would have helped if the filmmakers gave Billy just a bit more of a fun and playful side so that the transition to Shazam would have been a bit smoother. Number 2. Some of those jokes fell flat. DC movies don't all have to be mopey and depressing. Only Batman should be the one who's brooding and droopy. That's his thing. So it was nice to get a lighter DC movie that didn't take itself too seriously. But while I appreciate the lighter approach, I didn't appreciate some of the jokes which fell flat and felt a bit cringy. Right after Billy gets his powers, he tries to convince Freddy that it's really him underneath this grown-up. They're in the middle of a small road, and after Freddy is convinced, the two of them start discussing what powers he may possess. One of them is invisibility, and Freddy manages to trick a gullible Shazam into thinking that he's invisible when he actually isn't. So Shazam starts celebrating like an absolute idiot, and the cringe level on this scene is like a full 10 out of 10. I mean, sure, it's played for laughs, but it was just so silly. I remember feeling a sense of secondhand embarrassment when I saw the scene for the first time. It also didn't help that this kind of behavior is something that Billy would never do. Then, towards the end of the movie, in the final fight with Savannah, we have this confrontation between Shazam and Savannah as they're floating mid-air around buildings. They're pretty far apart, and Savannah starts going off on the cliché evil villain monologue. The joke here is that Shazam can't actually hear Savannah as he's too far away, and that from his position, All he hears are faint mumbles. Once again, falls flat. The joke gets old really quick. The monologue goes on excessively, and it doesn't help that this joke was already done and much better in Kung Fu Panda. Number 3. Shazam's lack of use of his powers. When Billy is bestowed with his powers, we learn that it's mainly a combination of the abilities of Greek mythological figures. The power of Zeus, the strength of Hercules, the speed of Mercury, and so on and so on. But then he uses so little of them in an actual fight, particularly his ability to shoot lightning out of his hands. He only uses it for fun, like charging random strangers' phones and using it on an ATM to dispense cash. Or using it for a street performance, where he accidentally fries the wheels of a bus, causing an accident. But when it comes to the actual fight against Savannah in The Sins, he doesn't use this ability, which was such a shame. It seemed like something he would have used as his first line of defense. You have a being here who's basically on the same power levels as Thor, but without the hammer. I just thought it would have made for a lot cooler of a fight scene if we saw him use more of his lightning abilities. Same goes for his other powers as well. He has super speed, but uses so little of it. The rest are pretty obscure abilities, like the Wisdom of Solomon, which we can give some leeway since it is hard to display that, but overall, the fight scenes are pretty average and not too engaging. The end fight scene between Shazam and Savannah felt like a watered down version of the Metropolis battle in Superman 2 between Zod and Superman. Number 4. Excessive tie-ins to the rest of the DCEU. Now look, I'm fine with an occasional reference to the other films to let you know that they're in the same universe. But this one has just too many that it becomes excessive pretty quickly, and some of it doesn't even really make any sense. We see Freddy is a fan of the DC heroes and has a Superman backpack, an Aquaman shirt, a bullet that pinged off of Superman, and a Batarang replica. And that's just the start. And at the end, Superman appears from the neck down to pay a visit to Freddy at his school cafeteria. But the one that takes the cake is the existence of DC action figures in the universe. I can accept that if superheroes existed, they would become icons which would sell toys and merchandise like in The Boys. But in this film, it's overdone and creates potholes in the continuity of these films. In Shazam's first encounter with Savannah in the store, we see a lineup of Batman and Superman figures, and Shazam even jokingly throws a Batman figure at Savannah in desperation. It's been established in this universe that Batman is an outlawed vigilante who murders criminals either himself or indirectly through his Bat brand. So it's a huge stretch of the imagination that Batman would be seen as a role model or that toys would be made out of him for little kids. Seeing Batman made into an action figure in a world where he exists kinda detracts from the movie-going experience. Number 5. The generic sins. Now, this one falls into the category of, I wish they did it better, but I understand why they didn't. The 7 deadly sins are personified in this film, taking on demonic forms that give Savannah his powers. While they were well designed, with each sin getting distinguishing features so that you can tell which is which, they're pretty much all the same in terms of their abilities or personality. All the sins are basically just generic evil monsters out to kill people. I felt it was a missed opportunity that the filmmakers didn't give them different personalities based on their different natures. But again, this wouldn't be easy to do, so what we did end up getting was quite okay after all. On another note, the foster family was pretty generic too. Except for Freddy, the other characters are just one-dimensional and stereotypical. We have the overly caring foster parents, the tech genius gamer Asian, the sweet 16 type of daughter going to college, but I guess it had to be done given the limited screen time. More had to be allocated to develop the main characters instead of the supporting ones, but maybe they could be less generic and explored better in future installments. Number 6. All the other kids get powers too? This part of the finale was kind of a downer for me. As I mentioned earlier, I would have preferred to see Shazam dish it out with Savannah with more of his abilities. He does outsmart Savannah at the end, which was a well-written way for him to win, but what I really didn't like was the fact that the filmmakers decided to give all the other foster kids their Shazam powers too. It was foreshadowed earlier that Savannah knew he had to find the Wizard's champion quickly before he discovers the full extent of his powers. Well, as it turns out, the full extent of his powers refers to him being able to bestow them onto others too. Once the other kids got their powers, the film lost all its tension and the stakes in its fight scenes from then on. It was just more not-so-funny jokes from the children in grown-up bodies. Look, I get that it's comic accurate and that Billy does have a family of superheroes in the source material, but I felt that it all happened way too soon. The Shazam family felt like something that should have been saved for a more epic moment in a later movie, after the characters have been more developed. Perhaps maybe against Black Adam in a sequel. Having it done in the first movie felt a bit premature and underwhelming, and honestly, it made for an overcrowded finale. And I wonder, is the granting of the powers permanent or just for the moment? Because if it was permanent, then Freddy is pretty much his own superhero now, and it kinda takes away from Shazam's surprise visit at his school. That was one of the best scenes in the movie, but if Freddy has powers, he'd be able to vouch for himself against any of his bullies or doubters. On a final note, the possibility of a sequel does raise some questions though. The studio would probably need to recast the actors, since by the time they get to it, the kids would have outgrown the roles they originally played. Black Adam isn't even out yet at the time of this video, much less a Shazam sequel. So what did you think of Shazam? It's definitely one of DC's better entries in their cinematic universe, but it's not without some glaring errors. Let us know your thoughts down below, and be sure to check out some of our other videos too.